From the beach in Egypt on the Gulf of Aqaba, we have gazed across the water with anguish for many years, knowing that Moses led the great multitude across the Red Sea at this exact spot. Ron Wyatt knew in 1978 that Mount Sinai lay beyond that distant shore. Mount Sinai, where the law was written by God's own finger. Finally, we can see this majestic mountain where God's own presence once rested. Jabal el-Lawz in northwest Saudi Arabia. In Galatians 4:25, the Apostle Paul tells us, "For this Agar is Mount Sinai in Arabia." Exodus 19:18, "And Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire." Could this blackened peak be the result of the consuming fire of God's own presence resting upon it? In 1 Kings 19, verses 8 and 9, we read how Elijah came to Horeb and went into a cave. Here we see a very large cave just below the solitary tree which is between two massive granite boulders. As we view the holy precinct, the area at the foot of the mountain, we can see a large fence and a guardhouse, which was erected immediately after Ron Wyatt showed this site to a Saudi archaeologist in 1985. This fence follows along the line of 18-foot diameter boundary markers which Moses was directed to erect by God. This sign by the guardhouse states that this is an archaeological site passed by royal decree, and that it is unlawful to trespass, subject to penalty. And as we pan to the left, here we can see where the fence ends on the other side. And now, as we pan away from the holy precinct, we look out into the area of the camp of the Israelites. There are several archaeological remains still here, but this one is of particular interest for us. In Exodus chapter 32, we read of the golden calf and how Aaron fashions it. And in verse 5, "And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made proclamation and said, 'Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord.'" There is little doubt that these are the remains of that very altar which Aaron built to the golden calf. When the Saudi archaeologist from Riyadh University, who went there with Ron in 1985, saw this, he was very excited. The 12 petroglyphs of cows and bulls captured his interest because they are found nowhere else in Saudi Arabia. The style of their horns and bodies is distinctly ancient Egyptian, the same style found in the temples and tombs of ancient Egypt. Unable to enter the holy precinct from the front and climb upon Mount Sinai, we now approach it from the backside, where the two large boulders with the solitary tree between them can be seen. Climbing the mountain here, we soon find ourselves on top of a large, sheltered plateau. Here we have a better view of the blackened peak. Panning the area, we find it to easily be large enough to accommodate the 70 elders who accompanied Moses up into the mountain at one point in time. The peak to the left is where the solitary tree is, but it cannot be seen because of our angle. And just ahead, over that ledge, lies the holy precinct. Looking down, we see the fence which follows along the bounds set by Moses, and just beyond that fence is part of the camp of the Israelites. Zooming in closer to the holy precinct, we can see the remains of an ancient foundation. Could this be the remains of the first tabernacle which Moses removed to the outside of the camp after the golden calf incident? Exodus 33 verse 7, "And Moses took the tabernacle and pitched it without the camp, afar off from the camp, and called it the tabernacle of the congregation." And directly adjacent to this foundation are the remains of an altar built of stone. Exodus 20:25, "And thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone." Panning further, we stop to look at the tracks made by the Bedouins' trucks before the fence was erected. This gives you a better idea of the size perspective of the enormity of this area. And here we see the guard building, an archaeological sign which we saw earlier from the front. Returning back to the foundation we saw earlier, the camera begins to pan outward, where we will be able to see the location of the altar to the golden calf. Exodus 32:19, "And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables out of his hands and brake them beneath the mount." Still visible today also is the stream bed which descended from the mountain to give the people abundant water for themselves and their flocks and herds. Preparing to leave, we can look down upon the backside of the mountain, and again we see the vast plain area. Arriving on the opposite side of this mountain, we find an area which fits the biblical description of Rephidim, the last encampment of the Israelites before they reach Mount Sinai. Exodus 17:6. The Lord tells Moses, "Behold, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. But the most incredible evidence for this sight is the giant split boulder upon a hill, with evidence that large streams of water flowed from it. The rocks still display the erosion pattern of tremendous amounts of water descending from this rock. And as we travel through the split in the boulder, we soon can see the channels cut in the rock from the water flow on the other side. and panning outward, we can see these channels continue out into the plain. After the battle, when Israel had defeated the Amalekites, the Bible tells us that Moses did something. As we go to Exodus 17, verse 15, and Moses built an altar and called the name of it Jehovah Nissi. Here are the remains of a very ancient altar, part of it fallen, perhaps from an earthquake or Bedouins looking for treasure inside. But enough is still intact to show it was indeed an altar, as it is not hollow inside, but solid all the way through. We continue toward the Red Sea. And just up ahead, we can barely see the Gulf of Aqaba. As we continue our approach, the wadi or canyon seems so narrow from afar, but now it can be seen to be large enough for the vast multitude to have traveled through. And across the sea, we can see the large beach area on the Egyptian side. Just as the beach on the Egyptian side is certainly large enough to accommodate several million people, here we can see that this beach also contains a tremendous plain. In Exodus 14, verse 30, we read, "Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the sea shore." In 1984, when Ron and his sons were imprisoned here in Saudi, Ron directed his captors to this beach in a helicopter, where he showed them a Phoenician-style column on this beach with inscriptions in archaic Hebrew that said that King Solomon had erected this column in honor of Yahweh to commemorate the crossing of the Red Sea on dry land. Today, all that remains there is this marker noting the location of that column, and while we do not know where they have taken it, we feel sure it is protected and will be located soon. As we look out into the sea, we can see the end of the tongue of the underwater land bridge, and that it leads across to this very beach just beyond where the column once rested. Panning the beach, we also can see the restored remains of the ancient fortress we believe was Baal Zephon of the biblical account.